Hello, this is Jeffrey Wu from the Human Enhancement podcast, and I'm really excited to have Dr. Molly Maloof with me on this program today. So we've crossed paths multiple times in different media reports, and more recently in different conference and panel events talking about human performance in biohacking. And I think Molly has a really interesting story because she's not only an MD with a practice, a concierge practice working with some of the top executives and entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley, she's also an active advisor to a number of interesting human performance startups in the Bay Area, and I think also globally. And recently came on board running medical and science for Sanos Intelligence, which is a cool continuous glucose monitoring startup that I've been tracking for the last couple of years. So excited to have you on the program.
Well, thank you.
So this is our first, I think, in-person podcast for 2018.
No way.
A great one to kick this year off.
Cool.
So how did you get into space? I think it's always great to zoom back and get your personal story. I mean,
Sure.
I think what is intriguing about your background is, I think I've talked to a lot of doctors on this program and also a lot of interesting tech entrepreneurs. But I think having both of those skill sets in one person is quite unique.
Well, thank you. I guess it kind of goes pretty far back into my childhood where my dad was always obsessed with technology. And so where I grew up, we always had to have like the newest, latest, greatest stuff in the middle of the Midwest. And by the time I hit 8th grade, I was like pretty acutely aware that like my body was changing by then. And
Okay.
I remember starting to read magazines, and I started reading Popular Science. And I started wondering, all about my biology. And I read about fighter pilots taking modafinil in the Army. And this was before like it was a prescription drug. This was like a substance that the government was giving people
Right.
to avoid having to sleep. And I thought that was the coolest thing, that you could take something and not have to sleep and you could just work. Because I mean, I was a pretty rambunctious young person. And I started taking supplements in high school, kind of just trying to figure out what was going on with my body, trying to see if I could do.
You were going to the store. And
I was going to the store, the health
Okay.
food store, and buying supplements.
Okay,
and like
cool.
taking things I probably shouldn't have taken, like ephedra. At one point, I was taking that, and I remember.
Which is now banned.
It's banned.
Yes.
I remember sitting in class being like, I feel like my arms are floating. So maybe not the smartest thing in the world to do at the time, but I've always been interested in performance and doing. I was one of those students who was like in every varsity, like in 2 varsity sports, in student government, on the dean's list, and like all these clubs, and I just like wanted to always be doing things, and it's hard to do that. And so for a lot of my life, I went through these phases of just like working really, really hard and then burning out. And fortunately, I've gotten to like my 30s, and I finally have, I think, balance. Sort of.
Figuring it out.
I think I
finally.
figured a lot of it out
Yeah.
by now. Not everything by any means. I mean, like that's the thing about biohacking and health optimization, is there's no destination. It's like your body's going to change throughout your life, and so you're going to have to try to mitigate some of the problems that come along with being human.
Right.
And so my practice kind of evolved out of a desire for there to be this, concept of perfect world medicine. Like, what if you could be the kind of doctor that you used to have, where you could spend as much time as you wanted with patients, and you could really get to know them and really understand their bodies. And then taking it to a step further, thinking about like, what if a doctor could really make you healthier? So that was that was how my practice evolved. And then, building a practice from scratch is kind of expensive. So I started consulting with startups at the same time as I was building this practice.
Right.
And I worked for a company that did personalized medical research. And then from there, I started working with a company called 3Scan. And then word of mouth comes around. I mean, San Francisco's not that big.
Right.
But I jumped into the tech scene because I saw that medicine was going to be transformed by technology. And I was sitting in my residency at the time, like hating my job, hating my life, and feeling like I wanted to innovate medicine. And my attendings were like, great, you want to do that? You've got 20 years of waiting in line before you have enough autonomy and authority to do so.
Right.
And I was just like, that's not good enough
right.
at all. So I was fortunate to meet some amazing doctors in Silicon Valley who I could model my practice after, who were optimizing health. And I also worked with other doctors who were developing expert systems for wellness. And these experiences were like my extended residency, essentially. And, now I have like what I consider to be a pretty great life because I kind of get to do what I want. And I have I think I have respect in our community of people who know what I do, but I'm by no means in the mainstream.
Right. Well, yeah, it's interesting. I think most doctors would agree with 100% what you just said, but I think it seems like the institutional framework of how medicine is reimbursed by insurers and payers and all this stuff, people can't practice in a way that I think what you're saying, which is like you want to get to know the patient or know your client, or you're like really just like you're coaching someone through their life transitions.
Right.
And I think you talk to people inside hospital systems, it's like 15 minutes max, you're churning your patients in and out and writing a script.
It's a billing encoding system that is designed to treat and prevent, well, sometimes prevent, but mostly treat disease. Right. And so the system's it's just not designed to do what I do, but that's why I believe the technology space is so important, because we're creating a second system of a consumerization of medicine and a like market of health. Right. Like there's this concept of, people have always thought about like alternative and complementary medicine, but a lot of this is becoming like truly more mainstream and
what would you
acceptable.
Say to the skeptics? Like, okay, like if it's not inside the hospital system, it's BS.
It takes 17 years to get from the bench to the bedside. So if it's in the hospital system, it's old medicine. So if it's in the hospital system, it's like frankly, a lot of what really works in medicine is military medicine. It's the stuff that we have learned from the battlefield that like turns out saves lives. But if you're traumatized and you're broken, they will fix you. But like chronic disease, I mean, we're still teaching medical students calories in, calories out. Turns out the body is not a closed system. Right. And we're still teaching students that like, if you look at the American Diabetes Association recommendations for food, it's like eat as many whole grains as you want. And you go to the grocery store and you see whole grains on tricks. Right. You know, like there's a problem with what we're telling people about health in the mainstream medicine world because it's old. It's old science. So the problem is...
How many hours of nutrition lectures did you get? I mean, I think I was talking to some other doctors and it's like we got like 2 lectures in nutrition.
They were not accurate and they were very minimal. And I actually complained and said, look, like this calories in, calories out stuff is not true. Like there's this great book that just came out called Good Calories Get Bad Calories. And it was all about how, certain carbohydrates like refined sugars and refined carbs spike insulin and that can contribute to obesity. And that's important to know, right? And they were just like, they just shook their head at me. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do something about this. So I actually...
There's no actual response. It's just like, no.
Well, I actually designed a course for medical students called Physician Heal Thyself, Evidence-Based Lifestyle. And it was all about all these things that we weren't being taught. Food as medicine, exercise as medicine, sleep is medicine, healthy relationships is medicine, just like toxic relationships is like poisonous,
Interesting. So is that being implemented in different universities or how is that rolling out right now?
The only thing I know about medical education right now comes from medical students that I'm watching on Instagram. Okay. So like I actually am not super connected to the medical education sphere anymore because I just am so busy, but I do see a younger generation of doctors that are starting to emerge and starting to recognize that like they want to be a part of this movement. And there are organizations like the Institute of Functional Medicine and the Institute of Integrative Medicine. And there's a few others that like are, making some movements in the space and that doctors are, I have a few colleagues that they knew going into medicine that they were only going to do a year of their residency to get their license and they were going to practice functional medicine. And so one of them has a chain of clinics called Parsley Health. Her name is Dr. Robin Berzin. Another one is Dr. Stephanie Daniels, who works in South Bay. And she's amazing. And like there is now a new path to practicing the way that you want to practice, but it's not, it's a small number compared to the masses.
I mean, it seems like to me as a observer that's interested in the space, that there's definitely like a decentralization of almost every single industry, right? Like you see cryptocurrencies with finance, and I think you start seeing that with biology, with biohacking. More and more consumers or listeners are probably empowering themselves with information, listening to this podcast, reading about the latest science and the latest research coming out of the clinic, what supplements, what interventions, what devices they could be tinkering with, and like arming themselves. So when they come and see a doctor like yourself, it's a more of an educated conversation rather than like, okay, tell me, doctor, what I should do for the next year,
Right.
for the next 15 minutes.
Oh yeah, a lot of my patients come to me with spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Of like all the supplements they're taking, and it's a lot. But they're like, I don't want to manage this all the time.
Right.
But then also, I like what you said about people really educating themselves.
Yeah. What do you see in your practice?
I mean, I think the biohacking movement that, frankly, Tim Ferriss was a big part of starting, and like Dave Asprey, and frankly, there's doctors who came before, there's people who came before them who were part of this. But this is I think this is a reaction to the system not serving people's desires for better health, right? And so people are having to do it themselves.
Right.
So there's like, that website Self-Hacked Joe Cohen has.
Right.
I've got friends at this company called Neurohacker. I mean, like, it's not just a few figureheads. There's a lot of people that are doing this now, because you can't go to a doctor. There's not enough doctors who do what I do, and the ones that do what I do, frankly, like we are all mostly very expensive.
Right.
So people want to, especially young, smart, bright people, they want to save money. They want to spend their money on the supplements and experiment. And I'm a big believer in self-experimentation. I mean, frankly, a lot of what you see in modern medicine is doctors experimenting on you, right? They're like, well, that statin didn't work. Let's try this one.
Right. Those are clinical trials, right? It's just like placebo versus some intervention. Let's see if it works.
Well, gosh, I mean, some of these clinical trials, I actually have friends in biotech, and, I do want to believe that like I do know that there are good scientists out there that are doing good science, but there are also a lot of people that are very carefully designing these studies to get the outcomes that they want.
Right.
And they've told me how they do this. What they do is they start with the endpoint that they want to show the FDA, because the FDA only really cares about endpoints.
Right.
And then they design the study so that they get a certain number of people with this type of presentation into the study so that they know they're going to get this effect size.
Right.
And basically what you do is you have a bunch of doctors who are recruiting for the same disease, and then you pick the patients from the people that they've recruited.
Right.
Like that happens. So a lot of these drugs, when they come out, they've only been tested on these small populations of people that they know they're going to work.
Perfect patients.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then they give them to everyone, and we wonder why there's so many side effects.
Right.
I'm not saying biotech's all bad, because like frankly, I've had patients who've had really, really important benefits from certain drugs that have like saved their lives. But I do think that it's important to realize that like you're going to be unique, and no matter what you put in your body, it's your own experiment.
Right. Yeah, I think people. It's funny to me because I think it's a drug is a chemical that you're putting into your mouth. Food is a chemical you're putting into your mouth. I mean, these are. There's no magic distinction between this is like an FDA drug. This is magically going to work for everyone versus like a food. I think biology is complicated enough to realize that, yes, there's a cascading network effect. Your biology is different from mine. We're going to respond differently to different interventions. Mm-hmm. How do you actually personalize? So I'm curious, how do you apply that personalization to your practice then?
Yeah. Well, the first thing, I've kind of developed like a system, I guess you could say, around this cycle, because you go through these cycles of experimentation, right? And it starts with really analyzing a person's goals for their health, because everyone's going to have their unique outcome that they want to achieve. And then
what are the most popular?
It depends on if you're a man or a woman. Living longer, better skin.
What are the differences between men and women?
So a lot of men want performance.
Okay.
They want stress. They want to be able to adapt to stress. They know they're going to put their bodies under stress.
Okay.
So they want to be
athletic performance.
Yeah, they want athletic, but they also, a lot of people want work performance and brain performance.
Okay.
I mean, especially a lot of engineers who don't work out. They want their brains to work. That's all they care about. And then there are some athletic goals people want to achieve, but and then depending on an individual's health problems, 'cause everyone's going to have a certain number of health issues.
Yeah.
It's kind of unavoidable in this country to not have something slightly wrong, but so hormonal imbalances are common in men as well. So, and then for women, a lot of it is, if you look at Instagram, it's beauty, it's energy, fertility, and skin. It's a lot more about aesthetics and appearance. But then there are also, the bodybuilder men that want the aesthetics, right? So, and then gut health is something that everybody's trying to fix. So, yeah.
Okay. So
that's
interesting.
There's the goals.
Yes.
And then what I do is I figured with, part of a job of a good consultant is asking the right questions. So part of the job of a good doctor is asking to me, everything you can ask a person. So I ask both the traditional medical history questions that analyze what could be wrong in the sense of like modern disease. And then I also ask I have a bunch of questionnaires around lifestyle and environment. So I've got sleep questionnaires, I've got psychosocial questionnaires, I've got executive function questionnaires, I've got nutrition, digestion, stress, metabolism. And so I'm really looking at all these different layers of a human and all of their qualitative descriptions of what's going on.
Yeah.
And then you're going to look at the quantitative. So you're looking at the labs, you're looking at the genetics, you're looking at the nutrition analysis, like the NutriVal from Genova.
Yeah.
You're looking at the microbiome. Now we have companies like Biome that give us the microbiome. You're looking at, you're kind of looking at like essentially all the organisms that are growing in a person's body. And then hormones are important, and clinical chemistry markers of methylation, and some immune markers as well. So, there's probably more that I'm leaving out, but there's a lot of tests.
Basic lipids, right?
Lipids, cortisol testing,
right.
And yeah, so if someone has a family history of heart disease,
right.
we'll do more heart disease testing.
Right.
I basically will tailor their lab panels to whatever they're predisposed for and whatever
right.
I see in their medical history. And then from that, we start layering the data, right? So you see the genetics, you see the predispositions to certain things, and then you see the actual expression of that in the laboratory tests, and then you see what are they complaining of, and then you start trying to see some pattern recognition.
Right.
And then from there, we go into the basics of optimizing health. So the simple things, it's kind of I always tell people, it's like, how do you grow a human? Well, you have to have light, you have to have water, you have to have air, you have to have food, but you have to have the right amounts for everyone, right? Yeah. And so like I'm looking at a person's home, I'm making sure they've got home water purifiers, air purifiers. I'm making sure that they're getting enough fluids throughout the day. I'm making sure that they're not drinking too much alcohol. Just the basics
right.
initially, because you just have to if those aren't being covered, it's like everything else is like detailing,
right.
Yeah. And then really looking at the nutrition from the lens of what do we need to add, what do we need to take away, what's going on with their meal timing. There's so much to discuss around circadian rhythms, and it really and a lot of when I think about food, I think about a person's current life and current settings and current stress levels. Right. So like I may not recommend a ton of fasting to somebody who's like totally screwed up their adrenal hypothalamic.
Right, they're underweight already. Right,
they're underweight. They're
right.
undernourished. Like they may not be the best person for the job.
Don't fast if
right?
you're underweight. Yeah,
or like if you're exceptionally stressed out, why would I send you to CrossFit?
Right.
Which is going to spike your cortisol even more.
Right.
So it's always about figuring out what can we do to get this person into a bit more balance. And then sometimes it's, hiring, trainers to work with them. It's also sleep is really key. So it's a lot of the basic stuff that you have to deal with first. And then you get into things like the hormones. You get into the gut. Gut health is really next. Gut
right.
health is like, if your gut is not functioning, then you're going to have disease. So you have to optimize the gut. And then you have to look at a person's hormones, and you have to basically see, what is their blood sugar like? What is their thyroid like? What are their sex hormones looking like? And all of these are intertwined with blood sugar. And so like if your blood sugar is abnormal, then all your hormones are going to be off.
Right.
So I use continuous blood glucose monitoring for people.
Cool.
So that people can
Which ties into Sanos as well.
Which ties to Sanos.
I'm actually wearing one right now.
Me too.
Freestyle Libres, yeah.
And so, I could go into more, but then there's like detoxification, and then there's mitochondrial health, and then there's immune system health. So it's really just like, there's a lot of these things you can't address until you've addressed the first
right.
things first and foremost.
Yeah, it's interesting that blood sugar that you've seen as a key indicator for so many downstream diseases. So
that was the one thing that I got out of all of this for doing all this studies on all these people for the last 5 years. I just came down to one thing. I was like, what can I do to scale what I do to the masses?
Right.
And I was like, blood sugar is like the ultimate lifestyle biomarker.
Right.
It reflects your stress levels. It reflects if you don't sleep well because you tend to eat more carbs.
Right.
It reflects your exercise.
Cortisol release elevates
cortisol is
glucose.
huge.
Yeah.
I mean, like, so I've been wearing this pretty much off and on for about a year now.
Yeah.
And I can see in my patterns when I was most stressed out. I can literally see the months where I was moving and I was like super stressed out, and I felt like garbage those months, but to see it was it's like the stock market of your bloodstream. It's like when things are going well and when they're not.
Yeah, and it's interesting that I think if you look at just the disease charts, diabetes, prediabetes affects 1/3 of Americans.
And half of people with prediabetes don't even know that they have it.
Right.
And that's the big thing around Sano Intelligence is like, we're not going to diagnose and treat disease, but we
Right.
are going to show people what's going on inside their bodies
Right.
so that they might be able to they might be more inclined to do something about it. And maybe that one thing that they do is they go to their doctor. Or sometimes when patients go to doctors and they say they have prediabetes, the doctors are like, great, what are you going to do about it? Like,
Yeah.
And the patient's like, you're supposed to tell me.
Right.
And I've had patients who've come to me because they're like, I'm pre-diabetic, I don't know what to do.
Right.
And so it turns out that like you look at their diets and some people have really healthy diets and are pre-diabetic. It comes down to the stress piece.
Right.
And so then you're like, well, where's your stress coming from? And then you can start triangulating it by like this actually can help detect like what's stressing you out.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that you're applying it in your practice for like type 1s, right? Like originally glucose monitors were designed for type 1s, and now it sounds like it's almost like a ubiquitous tool that you almost recommend to all your patients.
I put on everyone.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the
know?
future, because I think when I look at it, it's like, okay, we have our dashboards for our computer, for our cars, we have stock tickers that track our money portfolio.
Yeah.
Why don't we have any sensors that tell us real-time data on ourselves? I'm curious, like, what you respond to critics who say, that's too much information for the end user. Is that a question that ever comes up? Because I've had a couple conversations with reporters or skeptics who are like, or some doctors who are more old school.
There's a lot of information.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a lot of information. But like, part of what we're doing at Sano is we're making meaning of that signal so that you don't have to do it yourself. And like our vision is that we're going to have so much data from so many people that eventually we'll be able to find out things and be able to give you insights without even knowing you.
Yeah.
Like that's the dream, right? Is that we can actually predict what's going on and give you really actionable information. Without actually seeing you.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that's like the ultimate goal of like scaling my brain. I'm like, what if I can put this into an app and then help like millions of people? How great would that be? So, I mean, whether or not we do it it's going to be hard. I mean, it is hard. Like, I mean, I just went through all these different accuracy numbers of all these different devices. Right. And like, turns out that Abbott is like, it's like 12 to 15% inaccurate.
Right.
And I started checking it with a
finger pricks.
Finger prick.
Yeah.
And I started feeling really, really confused because I was just like, whoa, like, it's amazing I've gotten so much value out of this, given that it's not perfect.
Right.
And that's the thing that people
I
are
think
going to have to realize.
it's probably directionally correct.
Yeah.
But it's like, yes, like, are you 100 or like 95 or 90? It's like,
It definitely will detect patterns.
Yes.
And that's, I think, the big key with this is like, what is the overall pattern telling you?
Right.
And overall, if I see a person's fasting glucose is like pretty high every day, even if it's not a perfect number, I know that they need to do something.
Yeah.
If I see their postprandial glucose is consistently pretty high,
right.
It may not be exactly as high as they say it is, but like that is an alert that we need to think about what you're eating.
Right.
And I've just seen it change with people's lifestyle changing.
Yeah.
So it's like it can be done.
Yeah. And I think that's like why I initially got connected with Ashwin, the CEO of Sano. I think because we were experimenting with continuous glucose monitors with our different fasting protocols, and yes, like you can materially see your fasting blood glucose drop over time. And I think
that's
you guys
awesome.
have awesome news recently, right? Like Fitbit came in as an investor,
totally.
So I mean, I think it's I mean, what are the beyond like that news? Like, what are the big things we can expect from the company?
I mean, I should really have a chat with Ashwin about like what I can talk about.
So some things are secret in the pipeline then.
First of all, like,
well, for the listeners out there, like what is a high level value prop of Sano? So just to make sure that we're all on the same page.
So we have continuous glucose monitors right now.
Yes.
But turns out that if you're not a diabetic, it's actually pretty hard to get one.
Yes.
In fact, you have to go around the system, which is basically the definition of biohacking,
right,
in order to get what you want.
Right.
And I can order these in bulk because I'm a doctor.
Yes.
But if you want to do this for optimizing your health, you don't have that option. So
I either go to a doctor like yourself.
You have to go to a doctor
and be then, like, I'm curious, or I have prediabetes.
Right.
And I want to monitor this.
And that's the thing. Like, your insurance isn't going to cover it. And even if you have diabetes, your insurance might not cover it. So that's the crazy thing about this world of medicine is like, you have to be pretty brittle diabetic or complain a lot to your insurance company to get what you want and to get what you need.
Yeah.
And they are pretty expensive. So the core value proposition is that we will have something ideally direct to consumer, off the shelf, that you can just pick up, put on, download the app, start tracking.
Yeah.
It's gonna be different than the clinical grade tools, because we are developing a lifestyle. I mean, it's really a lifestyle tool.
Right.
Because of the FDA, we can't diagnose and treat disease, and we can't use this technically in a clinical setting. But I wouldn't. I mean, like, frankly, if I had diabetes, I would still be finger pricking to verify the numbers.
Right.
Just because, if you're dosing insulin and for carbohydrates, like, you want to be as accurate as possible.
Right.
So it's more, for me, it's there's a few value propositions. First, to the individual, just being able to get access to something that typically is hard to get from your doctor is great. Second of all, it's there's a lot of experimentation you can do with your body, and this can be a tool for helping you validate those experiments and see the results of these experiments, right? And then there's also this, I'm sure you heard of this Cell paper that came out maybe a year or two ago, all about how
different insulin responses to different foods.
Different glucose responses to different foods. If we all ate the same thing, we might all have different reactions, right? And so because of that knowledge that we have now, we need a tool that can enable people to see that what's right for you isn't right for me.
Right.
Like, I eat a bunch of, so beans are a great example. I really like beans, but they're like a longevity food. Every Blue Zone diet has them. But beans have lectins, and lectins can actually activate your immune system. So for me, who has celiac, if I eat lectins, I actually feel really, really not great for like a little while. Partially because I'm just predisposed to autoimmunity, right? Anyone who has celiac is more likely to develop more autoimmunity. So like, I eat a pretty strict autoimmune paleo diet, which is very similar to the Walls protocol. Essentially, it's basically lots of vegetables, healthy meats, some starchy vegetables, fruits, but very careful, like berries mostly.
Right.
And some nuts and seeds, and some eggs occasionally. I'm debating on those right now. But it's a pretty rigid diet, right? And if I eat grains and I eat beans, like, even though these are like what are cornerstone foods for most of the country, like, my body totally changes. Like, I gain water weight like crazy overnight. It's inflammation, and my body's reacting to it. So there's also this like big question around what do we not know about how food affects us individually in at scale, and what can we use to test this, right? Like, there's not that many tools right now that exist that enable you to get this data. And once we get data on millions of people, we should be able to apply some machine learning and artificial intelligence and start really figuring out what's going on with the individual, and figuring out how do we reverse prediabetes and diabetes, right? Like, how do we get a person, because like the doctors will tell you it's not reversible, but there's plenty of doctors out there who can reverse this.
Right.
And another thing I want to mention.
Yeah, why do you think that is? I mean, I think you see early success with like Verta Health, which is a app that's coaching people through their ketogenic diet. They have some success,
but they have a bunch of failures that no one talks about.
Sure. I'm curious, what is your take on it?
Okay, so I spent the whole last year trying to figure out, do we tell people to cut carbs? Do we tell people not to cut carbs?
Right.
Like, there's plenty of people who believe that, there's a doctor who actually recommends starch for diabetes. Right. Like a high starch diet, low fat diet.
Yeah, I think I've seen that.
There's literally doctors who recommend all sorts of things.
Yeah.
So after spending at the end of last year, not 2017, but 2016, I spent a lot of 2016 going to nutrition conferences. And I went to all these conferences with all these expert doctors. And you've got people like Jason Fung, who's like all about fasting and low carb eating, ketogenic. And then you've got Dr. Greger and Dr. Katz, who are all about low fat, high carb eating. Yeah. And you're like, these guys are deeply respected in their fields, but they're both giving you a very different recommendation.
Opposite recommendations.
Okay. Yeah. And then you've got the zone diet people who are in the middle. Yeah. And then there's like the Mediterranean, which is a little bit higher carb. And then you've got the Atkins. Right. And like there's this I just realized there's like a whole spectrum of what works for people. Right. And how do you figure that out? Right. Like, you're not going to be able to go to a doctor like me and spend that $5,000 to do an initial workup. Right? Like, that's too expensive. So maybe we can figure this out through this tool. So I experimented with low carb eating last year and found that I felt like garbage. I felt really bad when I ate really, really high fat. Turns out that I'm an ApoE4 gene. I've got one of them. So I have to be careful with saturated fat intake. And a lot of my fat was coming from animals and butter and things like, coconut oil.
So your triglycerides and LDLs were elevated?
It was my LDL particle number.
Okay. And
my overall total cholesterol. My triglycerides were fine.
Okay.
And my hemoglobin A1c was super low, right?
Okay.
It's at the lowest it is. So it was pretty low then, but now it's even lower. I started eating carbs again, like adding more vegetable carbs back in,
right.
eating a lot more vegetable carbs in August. And then slowly but surely, my cholesterol normalized. And I still eat fat, but I don't eat as much saturated fat at all. And cholesterol normalized, and then I started feeling really, really good. Like, really good. And then what else? And then my hemoglobin A1c was even lower. So now it's 4.7.
Okay. Yeah, so it's quite good. I mean, what 6.5 is like kind of like the danger zone?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I look at anything above like 5.7 is risky.
Right.
But like, there was a point, like this time, you're not going to believe this, but this time last year, I was like 5.5, 5.6. Okay. So now I'm 4.7. So in a year, I've dropped a point. And I did all this experimentation with glucose monitoring and found that like, for me, I'm just not designed to be like more Atkins, more keto.
Right.
I'm designed to be a bit more balanced.
Yeah.
But I have people who do remarkably well on high-fat diets.
Right.
I have people who do remarkably well on low-fat diets.
Yeah.
So it's like, we don't have answers.
I think the answer is like the hypothesis. There's definitely
answers.
personalization,
we have answers.
Right?
The answer is that you
gotta test yourself.
You have to test yourself, but
right.
Why should it take you your whole life to figure this out? Like, we should have technology that can do it for us.
Yes. Yeah.
And I like Biome for that too. I think Biome, if they were to just give you the reasoning behind why they give these food recommendations, like, it would be an even more powerful product.
Yeah.
But they do a pretty darn good job at letting you know like the kind of macronutrient ratios you should have and the foods that you should be eating. It's kind of like trying to scale functional medicine.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think the way I've been thinking about the space is that there are cool companies like Sanos that are building out the sensors on the human platform, right? And we need more and more ubiquitous, cheaper, more available sensors.
Yeah.
Like, these are kind of expensive. They, there's a little bit of a needle, a little bit painful, not too bad. Like my understanding is Sanos sensor is...
It's a microneedle.
It's a microneedle. It's like on the skin, doesn't really penetrate like beneath the dermis. Yeah. So that's cool. And, companies like ours, we're building consumables or inputs into the system that can manipulate those numbers.
Exactly.
So, for our ketone ester, our human ketone product, we oftentimes see, and we were talking a little bit about this before our, going live here, is that we see 20-30% drops in glucose within 30 minutes, and then we see elevations of ketones between 3 to 5 millimole in that same time frame.
That's so cool. And like, to me, having a tool to help people fast more comfortably. Yeah. Like, why not? Yeah. Like, we all should be fasting.
Right.
I personally don't really like the way it feels the first 2 days of fasting. I don't want to be around people.
Yeah. What does your fasting protocol look like?
I can only do it if I'm not around anybody, and I have to basically like not talk to people and stay by myself for a weekend. I'll do it on weekends, but like, I don't know how you guys go to work and function. Like, if I fast at work, I'm just like running late to meetings, and I don't have a good answer for this. I have done some reading about fasting in women's bodies being different than men's, but like, it just seems like our brains are wired to be in alert mode when we get like super low blood sugar, and it does seem like anecdotally like women tend to get hangrier. I know I do. Right. So, but the thing is, like, every time I've fasted, when I and I've really worked hard to do it, I remember just feeling amazing. Yeah. And so I haven't done it in a while, and that's one of my big goals this year, is to like really ramp up the fasting. Starting with, there was actually a great talk I saw on the internet recently by this doctor, I think is Berg. He's like a chiropractor, but he's got like tons of videos, like 33 million views of all his videos. Okay. He's crazy, but crazy popular. But he gave a talk on how to sort of like gradually transform your meal schedule into more of a fasting schedule, right. Going from 5 meals a day, which a lot of people are eating with snacks, to 3 meals a day, to intermittent fasting, to 2 meals a day, right. To eventually getting into the actual fast. Right. And then what can you do to make that slightly easier? Right. So I really like that kind of pattern concept, because it's really hard to change physiology overnight. You can do it, it just won't feel good.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I think our mutual friend Phil Libin has been pretty public about doing like 7-day, multiple day, long fasts.
He's a beast, man. He can do it for like a week at a time, and he does it like every other week.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, he has figured out how to do the social thing, which is interesting. Like, a lot of the problem with fasting is the social component. Because if you're like me and like you get invited to a lot of stuff. And the problem with being invited to a lot of stuff is there's always opportunity to eat.
Yeah.
And then you start realizing that as a culture, we just like don't stop eating.
Yeah.
And that's another thing about, so I've been doing all this research on glucose monitoring and how to make meaning out of this information. And I found some studies on hunger biofeedback using glucose monitoring. So what you do is you basically train your body to only consume food when you're at 80 to 85 blood sugar, which basically means that you have to be pretty hungry.
Right, yeah.
But I've noticed that when I wait for that, like, I'm authentically hungry and the food tastes better and it's just better for my metabolism.
Right.
So I think that that's another big powerful thing is like people need to learn to be hungry again. Maybe not crazy, super duper hungry all the time. Like, I just personally don't function as well at work if I'm not fueled.
Sure.
But you guys have nailed it. Like, you guys have figured it out. Like, you guys have, I just know that you do it every week and I want to figure out how to do it without not wanting to I think, hurt people.
I think for myself, I think it's like there's definitely a struggle or transition because I think the way I think about it is we've just trained ourselves, as you said, like to eat and expect food every couple hours, and I think our bodies expect that insulin spike, the sugar rush, and the crash, and in the first few times you start fasting, you're putting your system out of that lurch,
right?
Or you're lurching yourself, right? Because you have a very consistent rhythm of adding glucose.
Yeah.
So I think it's like just as much as you've trained over the last 20, 30 years of our lives, we need to kind of retrain ourselves out of it.
And it's kind of like you're constantly putting food in, but you're not like taking the garbage out regularly, right? And like fasting is essentially, we're eating ourselves and we're taking out the garbage, right? Where it's autophagy. And that is powerfully therapeutic.
Right.
And so we all probably should be doing this.
Yeah.
As a measure for preventing disease like cancer.
Right.
And in fact, like Dr. Jason Fung, like part of his treatment of diabetes is just intensive fasting regimens for his clients.
Yeah.
So like the question is how do we get the cost of ketones down?
Right.
Because like it's just not affordable right now.
Yeah, right now it's pretty expensive. So yeah, they're like around $30 a dose, but we're working with some synth bio companies to bring it down further, right? So it ostensibly can get down to the cost of sugar. So the core feedstock for the GMO E. coli is sugar.
Interesting.
Right. So we could hopefully at mass volume get it to a little bit more expensive than sugar, which would be really interesting.
Whoa, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be really powerful because I think that like if you think about evolutionary biology, the reason why fasting is so difficult is because it does activate stress hormones on purpose. Like your body, when you drop your blood sugar to a certain level, you start releasing adrenaline. You start, and you start preparing your body for finding food. Right. For like basically making sure that you can take care of yourself, and that's kind of in a natural like innate alert mode.
Right.
Now you guys have harnessed that in a positive way because for some people, it's like you're getting free Adderall, right? You're getting you're getting that free dose of catecholamines that's like, okay, now I can like focus.
Yeah.
But some people don't seem to have that same response. Some people seem to respond in a way that's like, I just feel super low energy and like I can't focus. And I think that like making it more comfortable for people to fast is huge.
Yeah. So like one of my working hypotheses there is that perhaps your ketones haven't elevated enough to overcome that low blood sugar, right? Because when you're fasting, you're lowering your blood sugar as you're draining your glycogen reserves.
Right.
Your endogenous ketosis hasn't kicked in yet.
No.
So you have low glucose and low ketones, so you naturally feel crappy.
Yeah.
So can you bridge it by having like high ketones while you're fasting?
It seems like a great idea.
So you kind of skip that medium step.
It seems like a really smart and like an authentic hack that doesn't seem to have a lot of downsides.
We got to do an experiment when we have more supply. So we actually like finger prick you and like track your glucose
on
your CGM.
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll coordinate that. One thing that you mentioned that I thought was interesting was circadian rhythms. That's something that, talking about like things I want to focus on this year, I wanted to focus my eating windows better around circadian rhythms.
Yeah.
And that often means, eating your larger meals earlier in the day.
Totally.
For a lot of my fasts have been focused on eating, later lunches, earlier dinners. I'm curious to hear, your thoughts there and how have you incorporated or in your practice or personally.
Well, a lot of my thinking on this has been informed by, again, Dr. Jason Fung, because I read everything he writes. But he basically believes that, and there's actually studies that have shown that basically when you load most of your meals at the beginning of the day, your metabolism it just functions more. It functions more optimally. It basically is more effective because you're using that fuel.
Right.
Your body is using the fuel because you're active.
Right.
Right. Unless you're sedentary. Like a lot of people are sedentary, so can't say enough. I can't like you're basically destroying your metabolism by being sedentary. And frankly, I was doing that through a lot of my 20s. I mean, I worked in front of a computer. That's basically your job as a doctor or as a techie. It's like being in front of a computer.
Right.
So like we're all like one of the biggest things you can do to damage your metabolism is to sit around all day. But also by eating late at night and not using that fuel, your body is going to logically store it.
Start loading it up. Yep.
So it's like we should probably be using most of our fuel during the daylight hours. It seems like we're designed to do that.
Yeah.
It seems like if you look at most of the animal kingdom, unless you're a nocturnal animal, you're not active at night. Now,
right.
There are plenty of people who are night owls, but there's a lot of research that shows that if you eat at night, metabolism is impaired.
Right.
It's just
like your natural growth hormone release is
the risk
mitigated.
The risk of cancer in night shift workers is dramatically higher.
Yeah.
Part of that is because metabolic derangements, and like there is this argument that cancer is a metabolic disease.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great new books on this, and like tripping over the truth.
Right. Can you summarize that? Can you summarize that argument? I mean, I think it's an interesting debate.
I mean, the argument is that basically, I guess I'll just give you a little anecdote. Yeah. Like I was in residency and working on a pediatric cancer ward, and we were feeding all these kids whatever they wanted because they were sick, and that's what you do, right? But I was like, wait. Let's think about some first principles here. What does cancer eat? Cancer eats
glucose.
Sugar.
Yeah.
Why are we feeding them sugar? Why are we pouring fuel on a fire?
Yeah.
And they looked at me like, you're trying to hurt the children's feelings, aren't you? And I was like, I'm trying to save their lives.
Yeah.
And I just lost it. I really I had a few patients die, and it was just like really hard because I was just like, we're doing everything we can. I mean, like pediatric oncology has an incredible rate of success, but imagine even how much higher it would be if we weren't giving them the fuel that feeds the cancer.
Right.
So now there's a lot of doctors working with, there's actually a doctor, and there's a great podcast called P5 Protocols. And there's a doctor on the podcast, and I can't think of his name, but he wrote a book on cancer as a metabolic
Thomas
disease.
Seyfried, Boston?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he basically has a program, I believe it's him, and they're giving people with cancer metformin and even statins in order to modulate the metabolism of a person's body as an adjunct treatment to chemo and radiation.
Yeah.
And they're finding really good benefits from this because cancer is like this, organism that grows out of control.
Right.
And really it's like there is this belief that like what the Western way of life does contribute to cancer formation because we're basically flooded with glucose at all times.
Right.
We don't have a lot and like I think it was there was this guy who worked with the Grateful Dead. He did all their sound, I believe. And I really wish I had, a better memory. But the guy ends up getting throat cancer, and there's an article about him in the Rolling Stone, actually, all about this. It's an old article, but he lived for like 15 or something years with esophageal cancer, which is like one of the most like mortal cancers.
Right.
Literally eating pureed meat. The guy just went keto, hardcore keto. He was like, I'm going to starve this thing.
Yeah.
And he did. And he survived for a while.
Yeah.
So, not that I think that like every cancer can be treated with ketogenic diets,
right.
But I do think that a ketogenic diet is a therapeutic diet for somebody who has cancer.
Right. I think it's worth considering as a nutritional adjunct to standard care.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I think the way I think about the genetic theory of cancer versus the metabolic theory of cancer is that the classic hypothesis of why cancer happens is some mutation in the DNA. And then that cascades toward there's uncontrollable growth. But the metabolic theory is like, okay, the metabolism has some issues. It's generating a lot of free radicals, and that in itself is mutating the DNA for uncontrolled growth.
Right.
So if you can fix the metabolism, perhaps you can stem off a lot of the end cancer effects.
It could also be both. It could also be you have this two-hit hypothesis.
Right.
And then you end up with the conditions that enable that cancer to grow, right? Like turns out that a lot of us have predispositions to cancer. If you just start digging into genetics, you're going to find that you're predisposed for a lot of things.
Sure. Yeah.
Like I have a family history. I don't even need to look at my genetics to know that I'm going to probably be at risk for cancer. My mother had colon cancer. I actually convinced her to get a colonoscopy, and she had stage 1, early stage, cut it out, cured. But it turns out that her grandfather and her great uncle had colon cancer too. So there's probably a genetic component. Even though the doctor said that she didn't have a genetic component, I'm like, come on, let's look at our family history. Yeah. Let's just use our logical brains here. So I'm gonna get a colonoscopy sooner, but I'm also, one of my big goals for this year is to really start limiting red meat and processed meat. Now, bacon is like the most delicious thing in the world, but I'm probably one of those people who shouldn't be eating a lot of it at all. And I don't eat a lot of it, but I think that like the key is looking at what you're predisposed for and then trying to design your optimization protocols to mitigate those risks. Right. Assuming, and not assuming, but kind of knowing that you have these predispositions, but it's the epigenetic programming that actually expresses them. Right.
You mentioned processed meats. I remember when we were on the panel, we had one of the Soylent co-founders there, and you were tearing. That was like, it was amusing to me. Soylent. Sitting next to, in between you two.
I was kind of being a little bit rough.
No, but I thought it was a valid point. I mean, I think we're in the heart of Silicon Valley, where Soylent is, doing quite well, feeding people
GMO soy, and all sorts of weird other additives.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting. I think it's worth having that counterpoint in that discussion. Like, what? Why are you so viscerally reactive against?
Well, first of all, I find it really weird
approach.
that people are like voluntarily consuming something that traditionally has only been recommended for people who are seriously ill, right? Like I have patients with inflammatory bowel diseases, and let me tell you that they do not really enjoy having to be on elemental diets. It's not good. Okay. So it's interesting that like somebody who's a healthy person would choose to eat oily cereal milk as their main source of calories. Like, I think it's I just think it's a symptom of like the misprioritization of people's energy throughout the day. Like, feeding yourself is like a very important thing you should know how to do as a human adult. Yeah. But a lot of people have been raised by their parents. They go to college. They eat what's served in the food court. And they never really learn how to take care of themselves. They never really learn how to cook. And we have this gigantic epidemic of chronic disease that is not going to be fixed if we are feeding people oily cereal milk, as calories. Like, it's not, and I mean, like, okay, so I called it dead food. And it's like, Soylent's not dead people, it's dead food. Okay? I said that because it's like, if you like eat plants, if you look at plants, like, it looks like a living thing, right? Like, you want to, most of your diet should be plant-based, right? And then there should be some protein. And I'm an omnivore. I eat meat. But like, I'm moving more and more towards game meat and wild fish as my main sources of protein. Plus I do some bone broth protein powder because it's the only one that doesn't taste like garbage. Okay. And also just, I don't react to it. Like, I react to everything, it seems. But I just don't really like the idea that people are just drinking this like bottled substance straight and only that. Like, you need to have you need to actually like think about like the general recommendations to eat a well-balanced diet. That's not a well-balanced diet. That's like an imbalanced diet. And like, when these guys are sitting in front of computers typing away and like not thinking about their bodies, it's like, it's a bigger symptom of like this problem with like our culture. It's like people are just disassociating from their reality and getting sucked into the digital realm, and that's not healthy either. Right. Like, we all kind of need to like disconnect a bit more, get out and actually like go to a farmer's market, look at food, decide what feels good, and start learning about what your body needs. Right. And like, you can't just, I don't know, like, I guess you could grow a garden by just pouring Miracle-Gro on it all the time, but it would probably eventually die if you just poured Miracle-Gro on it all the time. Yeah. You might want to put some compost in there. Right. I mean, that's like the critique of the modern factory farming system, where there's like a ton of fertilizers, like the meats are higher in nitrogen because of all the fertilized grain versus like grass-fed beef. Right. All that discussion. Right. I mean, I'm curious. I mean, I think if some of the Soylent people, the fans out there that I know that are probably listening, there would be the counterpoint. They're not. I think the idea has evolved into being, you don't eat Soylent every single day, all the time. You replace like a crappy
I don't know, hamburger instead.
I mean, there's definitely a lesser evil argument.
Yeah.
But I think I would redesign the formula.
Okay.
Like, first of all, it's funny that they use soy in Soylent. It makes sense, right? Because obviously, what are you going to make it out of if it's not people?
Right.
But I don't think that people are educated enough around GMOs, and there's so much argument like, are GMOs good? Are GMOs bad?
Right.
They are not good or bad. There are good ones and there are bad ones.
Okay.
Right? Like, just like anything else in the world. Just like there's meat that's not good. There's
Okay.
meat that's not bad. There's arguments that people would say all meat is bad, but like I'm not gonna say that. Like fish is actually pretty darn healthy. Where does it come from? That changes it, right?
Yep.
Like factory farm salmon from like an unhealthy farm that pours antibiotics all over it. It's not the same kind of salmon as like Alaskan
wild. Yeah.
Alaskan wild, not
Yeah.
the same things.
Right.
So just like that, GMOs, some of them just happen to be not as good as others. Like glyphosate is often used in GMO soy production. That has been shown through many MIT research studies. There's a doctor who has like an entire page of just publications on why this is bad for the microbiome.
Okay.
So I just wouldn't, I'm like, if there's something that's going to disrupt my microbiome, I am not going to consume that.
Okay.
And like maybe
So it's an additive to the soy rather than like an innate
it's the
part
way
of the
that
GMO.
they grow the soy in order for it to be Roundup ready,
Okay.
right? So, I just think that people like. I'm not a big fan of soy either.
Yeah, I think that's like a sub question where we've gotten a lot of questions around.
There's a lot of people who do
the estrogen
there's
effects of
estrogenic
soy.
effects.
Yeah.
There's also like fermented soy seems to be better.
Yeah.
And like Japanese cultures that consume a lot of soy tend to do more fermented soy.
Right.
But like, yeah, I'm just not a big fan of the monoculture crops.
Okay.
Like a lot of the corn and all of the soy that's in our food supply is what's making us sick.
Yeah.
There's a great documentary called King Corn if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, no, it's interesting if you look at the history, right? Like corn subsidies are a backbone of middle America farmers.
I'm from there, by the way.
So yeah,
I lobbied for healthcare reform in DC, and I also lobbied for medical students in Springfield, Illinois. I remember standing there with my representatives, having them talk about how new technologies can enable even greater yields for corn,
right?
Greater numbers of bushels per acre, and I was just like, just thinking to myself at the time, even I knew this like 10 years ago, like we're not going to end up being able to feed the world on grains if the world is getting sicker
on grains.
Dying. Maybe that's our like ultimate like existential strategy for destroying the human race. It's just like
we kill ourselves with
food.
And then like this less population growth and it's sustainable now.
I guess that's what we're doing, right? It's just slow.
Yeah. And painful where like healthcare is not a sixth of, US GDP.
It's insanity.
Yeah. It's like a slow, expensive bleed of human civilization.
That's the funny thing about like cryptocurrency and the healthcare system. I started having this understanding recently where like everyone's freaking out like cryptocurrency isn't valuable. It's not worth anything. It's all made up. And I'm like, so much of the healthcare system costs are made up. Like a cost of like a syringe to draw blood is like dramatically marked up once you get to the hospital.
Yeah.
And then you're billed for that. Like that's money being created. So like, a lot of these valuations for these cryptocurrency, companies, like, yes, they're being like totally overblown and and they're being like made up as we go. But like, isn't that all of the money system?
Culture, all of society, yeah, all of fiat currency, yeah. I mean, that's a whole different debate.
Whole other debate.
Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, so you have Sanos going, you have your concierge practice going.
Yeah.
What other exciting things are you working on with your advisories, positions, and all of that? Like, what else is on the radar for you for 18?
There's a company called Biomarker.io.
Okay.
And I'm a really big fan of them. You guys should know about them. Because what they're doing is they're creating a platform for taking all of this personalized data from all these different streams from our bodies and enabling supplement companies to actually prove their claims. And they're using streams from even healthcare records now. Okay. So they're able to like take in records from Epic and Cerner and also wearable technologies and all the API platforms and aggregators. And they're taking all that data and they're saying, you have this product that you want to sell, but like turns out clinical studies are really hard and expensive to do.
Yeah.
We're gonna help you prove it, and so we're gonna use this platform and teach companies to help them find real value in their products.
Interesting. Is there a consumer offering or is it?
I want there to be a consumer offering.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, you really, when it comes to startups, you always have to kind of follow the money, and unfortunately, the money is in the companies and not the consumers. However, I think that the supplement space is going to be revolutionized by personal health technologies. Yeah. And the more that we can like actually aggregate all this information and figure out what's working for us, what might work for us. Like Self-Hacked has this, genome reader that is a pretty decent job of giving you your predispositions to different deficiencies and other things. But it's just a start, right? Like we actually need to see the supplement space become more personalized. Yeah. And I actually spoke about this like 2 years ago at the NBJ Summit. All about why like the next big thing in supplements is going to be personalization. Yeah. And so I like this company because I think they're going to enable a lot more of that.
100% agree. I mean, it's a huge market. I mean, the global market for supplements like 50 billion plus.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's a huge industry.
Totally.
And it's still, basically based on the same legislation and technologies like in the 70s essentially.
Totally.
And it's like, okay, our understanding of how what supplements, have signal, what is noise, and how do we actually dose it for the right person at the right time.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, to me, they're medicine, and they just happen to be over the counter, which I'm all about consumerization of everything.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, make everything available.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
So Biomarker
what else am I interested in? There's a company that I'm not advising, but I am a big giant fan of called Leaf Therapeutics. And so speaking as someone who, someone such as yourself who likes continuous monitoring of everything, it's a heart rate variability patch that has an app associated with it. It's a patch.
Huh, okay.
That you put on your chest. And I've used heart rate variability from
like
this company
Polar.
I've used a First Beat, Polar, Wahoo, like there's all types. I use them to exercise, but like this one specifically for heart rate variability. And it's such an important marker. Like I think glucose and heart rate variability, like if we had these streams at all times, we'd all be better off.
And they're pretty simple. Like it's not like you need to do crazy blood draws or anything crazy.
No.
Yeah, these are like pretty basic.
Yeah, but they're really useful because it's a real-time stress sensor.
Yeah.
And so what they're doing is they're designing this platform around reducing anxiety. And it can also be done for reducing hypertension. It can also be done for reducing stress. Like it can be done for improving meditation. Like HRV has got like endless possibilities. Right. But like I think Apple does collect it from the watch, but I don't think that they've done a great job at like.
Do they surface it? My understanding is that their sensor's not accurate enough to do HRV.
They're reminding you to breathe. I don't know. Is that just automatic? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that they do have a like rudimentary HRV, but I don't think that they're showing it to you.
Okay.
Now it is way more accurate when it's on the chest.
Right.
So I did this for a few weeks last summer with the Leaf Therapeutics, and it was really big and clunky. But the coolest thing is that it's got haptic feedback.
Okay.
So when you are getting stressed out, it will alert you, and it'll teach you through the pattern to use your breath to slow down your emotions and actually reduce your heart rate. And to actually improve your variability.
Interesting.
So it's like giving you this real time. And there was this moment where I left their office. I had it on. I was walking down the street. I had to get this medication to a patient who lived in San Rafael. So I had to call a Lyft to like get her the medicine on time. And it was like there was traffic and it was like so much going on. It was Soma.
Right.
There's like crackheads, and I was kind of feeling the stress and I could actually feel it start vibrating. And after I dropped off the Lyft, I like started consciously breathing, and before I knew it, I was like back to baseline. And I just thought that was really cool, like a really cool experience to have, where like I literally just got this thing off the shelf, like they just gave it to me,
and it worked,
it worked, and so. Yeah, so like there's another company that's the Aura. I think it's
Aura Ring?
There's Aura Ring, but then there's another one that is like it's like a thing you hold in your hand, you meditate with. That uses heart rate variability. So I think heart rate variability is going to experience a big movement in this like next year.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think a lot of our athlete partners that we work with, they use that for recovery as a marker for recovery. How hard should they train today versus tomorrow?
Really, I mean that's huge in fitness.
There. Yeah,
and I think that's something that we all need to recognize too, as we're sort of like athletes at the office, right? Like we're stressing ourselves out every day, but like how hard should you push your exercise after you've had like a crazy day of work, Like maybe you should be doing yoga this evening instead of CrossFit. I don't know.
Interesting.
But there's this idea of like being able to really use these tools to tailor our lifestyle to optimize our health in real time.
Yeah, 100%. Anything else? It sounds like you're covering the huge gamut here. What other things other sensors?
So, this is like a fairly taboo topic, but like I'm a big believer in psychedelic medicine,
Okay.
and I think that MAPS is actually getting closer and closer to their financial goals.
Interesting.
To
That's the MDMA.
MDMA-assisted psychotherapy,
Yeah.
as well as psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy
Yeah.
in New York and in Johns Hopkins. So
Yeah.
these studies are just getting better and better. And the idea that, like, so there's, like, this idea of wellness being body, mind, and spirit, right?
Right.
So, like, HRV in a lot of ways is, like, your body and your mind. Like, you're learning really about
Right.
how to manage your emotions, how to manage your physical experience.
Right.
But, like, there's a spiritual aspect of medicine that just hasn't really been, it's just been so taboo for so long.
Right.
And, you know, meditation is great. I'm, like, a big believer in meditation.
Yeah.
Meditation has enabled me to, like, trip on my own neurochemistry. I've been to meditation retreats where I've just been, like, totally high on my own brain. It's awesome.
This is like a silent retreat, or
No,
okay,
it's
this is
actually it's like a specific type of meditation.
Okay.
It's very obscure, esoteric stuff
Okay.
that, like, you would not. It's actually discovered. Like, the one I went to is, like, run by a doctor, of all things.
I'm curious
He's
about
a
all
French
of this.
doctor.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean,
It's
like,
just
people
a
have very
really-
strong subjective experience. I mean, there's clearly signal there.
Oh, yeah.
Like, meditation, like, has, like, real quantifiable
Yeah.
metrics as well.
Yeah. So meditation and psychedelics are kind of like, meditation's like if you're gonna take a week or 2 weeks to go climb a mountain, right? Whereas psychedelic is like, I'm just gonna take you in a helicopter right up to the top of that mountain.
Right.
And it's a shortcut. And if you do it in the context of a therapeutic environment, people have experienced, like, debilitating PTSD being reversed.
Yeah.
I've seen patients with, I mean, this is something that happened last year, but ketamine-assisted therapy for depression is, like, now in clinical offices.
Yeah, the data is really good on that.
It's just like being
Yeah.
available. It's, like, available to people.
Yeah.
So, like, it's possible that within 2 years, we will be able to administer legally psychedelics as medicine in a context of compassionate use.
That'd be really cool.
I just think that, like, there's a lot of people with trauma in our country,
Yeah.
both from, like, years of racial discrimination,
Right.
lots of war,
Yeah.
refugees,
Right.
you know, lots of rape. We also know, like, the Me Too movement's come out of this, like, awareness of, like, a lot of trauma.
Yeah.
People are traumatized by human life.
Yeah.
So if there's ways that we can help with that spiritual realm and healing that trauma and enabling people to actually, like move on, I just think that, like, it's truly transformative, and it enables people to, like, for a lot of people, until they deal with those underlying issues, it's really hard for them to make the behavioral changes that they need to optimize their body.
Right.
You know? And so I'm just, like, I just have, like, a huge hope that the government isn't going to continue to crack down on all this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it shouldn't be a taboo. I think we should talk about it. I mean, I think when people are being prescribed antidepressants, SSRIs, I mean, these are potent drugs too. Like, again, everything is like a compound that we're eating. Why are some just like, ooh, those ones are kind of scary.
I know.
These are just as bad, if not worse, for you.
Totally.
like straight up in terms of mortality usage or LD50s. I mean, some of the drugs that we're just prescribing people are worse than psychedelics.
Exactly. I mean, like, that's the thing about SSRIs. Like, in teenagers, there's a black box warning that it'll make you more likely to kill yourself because it'll take you just out of depression just enough, because it doesn't work very well, but it takes you just out of depression just enough that you have enough energy to shoot yourself. Like, that's terrible.
Yeah.
Right?
Jeez.
Like, we need things that actually fix the problem, the underlying issue.
Right.
And what they do is they enable you to go to that space of, like, pain and fear and actually do it in an environment where you feel pretty good. Right? You feel pretty great when you're on these drugs. And they're also a lot safer. Like, the stuff that's on the street, the stuff that people are taking. I mean, I tell people, like, don't take MDMA if you're buying it off from, like, a drug dealer. Like, it's you don't even know what it is.
Right.
It's probably something totally different than you think.
Right.
So, like, don't do that to yourself, you know?
Right.
But if you had, like, imagine if you could go to, like, a mental fitness center,
right,
and see a doctor who could literally help you train your brain for better mental fitness. Like, another big thing that I'm kind of interested in. Just, I don't know if you're interested in this at all, but neurofeedback is something that I'm going to start doing this year.
Yeah.
Because I think that one of the problems with our culture, especially in tech, is, like, there's literally shiny objects everywhere.
Yeah.
And we become so trained to seek dopamine that we actually forget to be able to focus on demand when we need to. So I've just heard that, like, neurofeedback is, like, really great for ADD.
Interesting.
And I don't take any stimulants, but I take supplements, but I don't take any, like, hardcore stimulants. But I have been told that, like, it's really helpful for that. And then I know there's a few companies that are actually trying to make more commercially available like, I can't think of the name of this company because I just heard about them at a startup event.
Like EEG headsets that help you do neurofeedback?
Yeah, neurofeedback for specific use cases.
Okay, I've seen a couple of those,
So that's kind of interesting.
I mean, it seems to be a popular thread, actually. I'm glad you brought it up. I mean, just a sense that, tech companies have addicted us to their services with dopamine hits.
Oh, yeah. It's dopamine, and now we have cryptocurrency, and then it's like everyone's day trading now, right? So we're all checking GDAX and Binance, and everyone's like everyone's gambling every day on that. Like that's part of why cryptocurrency I think is so popular is because of that. I'm reading a great book actually right now, 2 books. One of them is called The Hour Between the Dog and Wolf, and it's all about the biology of traders,
right,
and all about the hormonal impacts and the impacts of different neurochemistry cocktails on like large scale trends in the economic system based on people's biology.
Right.
And then there's also a great book that I'm reading. There's another one called The Psychology of Risk, and it's all about the psychology of trading, because I think that like we probably are in a bubble right now, and there's this like this mass hysteria that everything is awesome. I mean, I hope it's not a bubble, because I would like to believe that the future is all about decentralized money systems. But like I'm really interested in just like how biology affects every day, and how biology affects cultures, and how biology affects like populations, especially populations of people acting in sync around certain topics.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember reading some early data around, testosterone in male traders being very, very correlated to like the decisions that they're making.
Oh, totally.
Right, like higher risk tolerances, like bigger bets. I mean,
I have a great story for you. Yeah. So I had a fascinating client who developed this really weird adrenal disorder out of the blue in his 50s. He was like a high functioning normal guy. His doctors all said, "You just have anxiety." He's like, "I've been on expeditions like to multiple continents in like sub-zero temperatures, and I was the chillest person at those events. So like I'm not an anxious person."
Right.
And so he ends up having these like these issues, and turns out that he has this. We discovered together that he had this genetic disorder that actually forced him to develop hyper testosterone levels. Like instead of hypogonadism, it's hypergonadism.
Okay.
So like he legitimately had like higher testosterone than a normal person, but he also had extremely low cortisol.
Okay.
So he was literally like the perfect combination of an investor.
Right.
So he literally took gigantic risks with no fear.
Yeah.
And luckily he was very intelligent, and he ended up shorting a European government at one point and making a ridiculous sum of money.
Right.
But the funny thing was like it was his biology that predisposed him to this. Unfortunately, later on in life, it started going haywire.
Yeah.
And his adrenals started overproducing certain chemicals, and he ended up with malignant hypertension.
Okay.
So I don't want to get too into details because of HIPAA, but fundamentally it was like by learning all about this himself, he like understood his entire life.
Yeah.
So I think that there's so much about biohacking that's like, it's about self-discovery.
Right.
It's actually about understanding why you're unique. And like, now that he's on a certain cocktail of medicines, like his hypertension's gone. But like, he went to the best specialist in the whole world.
And
nobody could figure it out. And I just happened to find this weird genetic defect that is like now being published. There's actually an expert doctor who's publishing it with him, because I didn't want to write the paper. But
that's cool. I mean, I think it's a cool. I mean, it's just cool to realize that, maybe if you're really good at trading, maybe it is like, okay, how can you, if you don't have that, lucky factor of genetic, I guess, characteristics, how do you manipulate your body and in a way that can mimic some of those benefits?
So like, I think pretty much everyone in San Francisco has some sort of Bitcoin interest right now. It just seems like it. But it's funny, like maybe
when this goes out, everyone's already like, they're super excited.
Everyone's kind of like going up and going down, and we're all experiencing these emotions.
Right.
And even if you're not in it, like I even know people who don't invest in it, and they're experiencing the emotions because they're just angry that everyone's interested in this, right?
Yeah.
But the people who are in it, like it would be really great if we could figure out how to not let the wild volatility of this market affect us physiologically.
Right.
And I think that like the key is meditation. The key is like really training your body to just take that space between perception and reaction and learn to decide how you're going to react instead of just reacting. But unfortunately, like it's just so commonplace to be a reactive person. And if you look at Trump, like the man is so ADD.
Yeah, he's like pure reactive.
He's pure reaction.
Yeah.
He's pure ego.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have any space between perception and reaction. I've heard that he can only read like one page at a time, and it has to have his name on it multiple times.
Yeah, to like get his attention.
Yeah, so that's a great symptom of the country's problems. Like the man who's leading the country has no attention span.
Yeah.
Like neither do all the kids in the country. Like
Yeah.
if we all just took a step back and like really slowed down our lives and really just spent more time in contemplation, we'd probably be much better at all the things that we do.
I agree. I mean, I think talking about 2018 interests, I mean, I think I've shut down all my notifications on my phone. I've turned my screen from like color to like black and white.
Oh my God,
it's, like,
that's so
less...
hard. I've done it and I can't handle it.
Well, because it's too boring,
It just makes me sad. I'm just like, like why?
I bought my colorful, expensive phone.
I want the colors. I bought this phone to see the colors.
Yeah. I mean, but I think it is just like, you know, how do you set up yourself in a way to like distract yourself less? I think you're absolutely right. How do you think more deeply on fewer things?
Well, yeah, there's this great book called The Disciplined Pursuit of Less.
Yeah.
And then there was a big article in the Wall Street Journal a few days ago all about by doing fewer things, we are actually going to be more successful. Yeah. And it's taking me years to figure this out. But like one of my big goals over this year, like you're asking me all the things I'm involved with, is like, frankly, like I'm doing too many things as it is. You know, like I'm like, you know, I've been approached by TV studios to like do shows, and I'm just like, I can't do it all. Like or I'm not going to do it all well.
Right.
So I'm trying to figure out like, what of all the things that I get to do, which I'm now in a really great position to like be able to decide what I do with my time pretty much all the time. It's like, what do I really, really want to do? And what does the world really need right now? Yeah. And like the world really needs to calm down, nourish themselves, and connect with each other way more. And so like one of my big priorities is just like seeing my family more often, you know, like that's to me, like really cultivating my friendships and my relationships. Like that's that was of all the things that were stressful last year. I moved a couple times, and moving is just like one of the most stressful things you can do.
Right.
But like having support from family and friends and community is like so important. It's like the most valuable thing you can create.
Yeah.
You know, so they say your network is your net worth. And so what I'm really working on right now is how do I cultivate deeper relationships with fewer people and really make those matter? Because like at the end of your life, you're going to look back at all your success and it's like not going to matter. It's the people that you lived with, you know?
100%. I mean, I think I want to almost leave it at that because I think that's like a perfect point to end the conversation. But I mean, I think there sounds like there's a lot of things that we should check back in on.
Yeah, sure.
So like in the next few months when some of these things, you know, get sorted out and they're underway, and as you spin up new initiatives and threads, I'll have to like just keep track and follow along the ride here.
Oh yeah, and I'm so in and doing some biohacking around the ketones. Okay. Let's do it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cheers. And as always, enjoy all the questions and requests for different guests. We always appreciate that feedback. And as always, if you like the episode, please give us high ratings on your different platform. You can subscribe on YouTube, SoundCloud, Apple, and Google Play. Thanks so much.